Welcome and good news! The long-awaited gameplay tag update for the character editor is finally here. This update brings massive improvements from better CDA handling over widget updates and new features for metahumans to pawn-based customization and other changes. If you're upgrading from version 10, check the wiki and migration guide before you dive in. Let's take a look at the key features. The core of this update replaces the old anatomy and CDA collection enums with gameplay tags. Here you can see a customization data asset where I expanded the anatomies and collections with the old enum values. These are deprecated from now on, but are kept in the project for the migration purposes from version 10 to version 11. In version 11 of the character editor, you can now use the Unreal Engine gameplay tag system to categorize your customization data assets. For this purpose, we have the gameplay tags in here. You can select similar values as the enum values before, but you are more flexible when managing and filtering CDAs because you can also use parent tags, child tags, and even sub-collections if you prefer. To implement this system, the character customization component and lots of other blueprints have been updated. Please check the wiki for more details because there are too many changes to be covered in this video. As a first impression, what you can do with the new filtering, we have added a gameplay tag tester, which you can move to the scene. And in the details panel, you have those categories here: gameplay tag tester anatomy basic, anatomy hierarchical, performance and sorting. And one core feature of the gameplay tag system in the character editor is breaking and making anatomies. So we can match generation, gender and race to specific anatomies and vice versa. For this, for example, you can choose any anatomy of your liking and hit break anatomy. This is a functionality used by the profile manager. The same thing, you can go here and select another generation and then make anatomy. And then you have the human male child. This is done through a data table that matches. For example, if you select a totally wrong gameplay tag in here and select make anatomy, then error thrown that this combination is not found in the data table. Furthermore, we have the feature to break anatomies hierarchically. This is used by the profile manager to populate the race, gender and generation buttons. And for example, here you have the human female adult and human male adult. And if you hit break anatomies hierarchically, it spits out the race human and the matching genders per race. You have the human key, which maps to female and male genders, and also generations per race and gender, where the key is the combination of race and gender. And then you have here the adult. In the next section, you can see the performance, where you can test a CDA to some filter. And we can try the tank top from before, where we can just hit the button and the output log displays true or false if the filter would match the CDA settings. If we open the CDA, we can see we have those gameplay tags, human, female, adult in the anatomy and the collection default, and the CDA filter is none. So in the wiki you can see the exact rules when the CDA filter matches, but for the short preview we have the anatomy and collections which are AND gated, and inside anatomy or inside collections we have OR gates for all the possibilities. So for example, if we choose the human female adult and the human female child and hit the test button again, then the gameplay tag tester displays true because this anatomy is inside the group of those two anatomies, and this works vice versa. So as mentioned before, you can also use the parenting system. For example, we just want to filter only for human female assets, then we can also get this CDA listed. If we would choose a totally different anatomy, here for only selecting the males, then this CDA is not filtered and would not be displayed in the UI, for example. This can be, as mentioned, combined with the collections as well. If we have evening dress in the collections and would actually filtering for the correct anatomy, this CDA would not be filtered as well because the collection has to be matching. If we would choose default collection, then we would get the CDA back. One thing to mention is this iterations count over here, which simulates in this case like 5000 CDAs being filtered at once with this CDA filter. And this should give you an expression on what your filtering performance should look like in your game. As you can see, if I hit the button and the filtering output is directly there, it's pretty fast. But keep in mind that if you add more gameplay tags in here, like 10, 20 gameplay tags, and the filter is extremely long, all these gameplay tags have to be iterated through each other, and this might decrease performance. But as also written in this tooltip of the button, not all of the CDAs in your game are filtered at once, because the CDA pickers, for example, filter the CDAs initially by their classes. So if you have 1000 total CDAs in your game, there's only 200 CDAs in the upper body picker and 150 in the lower body picker, for example. And then the filtering applies only to those. And last but not least, there's a sorting category where we just can test simple ascending and descending sorting of the gameplay tags in this array, which is used by the character editor tools, for example. The character editor tools now features a brand new CDA manager where you can filter, validate, and migrate your CDAs, and got updated randomization functionalities. To open the character editor, you go to the base folder in the editor utility widgets and search for character editor tools. You can press right click and run editor utility widget. Afterwards, if you did this once, you can go to the tools menu and here editor utility widgets, character editor tools. This will open the character editor tools in a separate window. Here we have a status line and an action button. On the right side you have the tabs CDA Manager and Randomization, and currently we are in the CDA Manager. The CDA Manager gives you information about all the CDAs that are loaded in your engine. They are grouped first by packages. If you have multiple packages, they are listed below. Then the next grouping is the class inside those packages. Here, for example, accessory, feed, classes, and so on. And below this grouping, you can find the CDAs themselves. And here the information is as written in the table headers above. CDA is the white line, mesh is the gray line, and here display name, thumbnail, anatomies, and collections. You can click on the CDA to open one and edit those directly. The same thing goes for the mesh and for the thumbnail asset. Furthermore, the class and package rows give you information about the health status of your CDAs in a summary view. Here you have the total number of CDAs in the class and in the package above. Here you have the valid number of CDAs, the valid debug assets. Debug assets are the CDAs that are flagged like this to not be shown to the player. And here you have the valid except cosmetics. Cosmetic validations are for the display name and thumbnail. If you do not need those validations, you can turn them off in the settings. Then next we have the warnings and the error display. To get details about individual statuses, you can go to one individual CDA and hover over the status icon next to the culprit of the status. For this example, here's the display name not set, and a fallback to a beautiful asset name is given. On the other hand, here you have the error, mesh not set, the CDA will not be displaying game. And on the left side, we have a validation summary. If you prefer this view, you can see all the status at once. This is only displayed if something is wrong. Here, if it's totally fine, if it's a valid CDA, there's no tooltip. If you want to filter your CDAs to have a better overview, you can go here to the filters menu. We have the CDA classes filter, where you can select any of the subclasses or the parent classes, so the parallel CDAs are being filtered out. Or if you prefer filtering by gameplay tags, we can filter all the anatomies. And all these three lists here, CDA class, anatomies, and collections, are dynamic. So if you have new CDAs with new collections, they appear in here as well. And this is also valid for the CDA class. If you prefer to have another hairstyle, for example, for the eyebrows, then they appear in here as well. And next you have the verbosity filters, where you can toggle based on the status of the CDA. For this I reactivate those CDA classes real quick, because the errors are not shown. And now you can just simply deselect all the valid ones, and you only see warnings and errors in here, so you have a better overview. To navigate better and customize your CDA manager, we have the settings menu, where you can find expansion buttons, where you can turn on or off the validation of the cosmetics. If they are turned off, they are simply ignored. And here you can show or hide empty packages or classes to make the view a little bit more straightforward. The last option in the settings menu is show deprecated enums, which is used for migrating CDAs from character editor version 10 to version 11. This, if turned on, displays here the old enum values that are sitting in the CDAs compared to the gameplay tag values, which are the only values in here if you turn this option off. Last but not least, here's the migrate gameplay tags button, which is only responsible for the migration as well. So you can find out in the wiki how to use this if you need to. And next to the CDA manager, there's the randomization tab, where we also find a compact version of the CDA manager that lists all the CDAs that are used for randomization of the currently selected pawn. And it has no own filtering because it depends on the anatomy and the selected collections on the right side in this randomization panel. Below the title of the randomization panel, there's an instruction displayed. Select a customizable pawn to edit. Simply click in the viewport on your pawn that you want to randomize or modify. And now it displays which pawn is selected and which anatomy data table it is using. Here, the version 11 default profiles. This data table is used to pre-fill the anatomy dropdown, so you can change the anatomy here. You can check the accept debug assets. So as mentioned before in the validation, you can also utilize those during randomization. A new feature of the blueprint randomization in this update is allow removing CDAs. So it also allows, if you, for example, randomize the upper body, then it has a possibility to also unselect the current upper body. And all the controls below allow removing CDAs are dynamic and connected to the selected anatomy and or to the selected collection. For example, here the collection dropdowns are directly connected to the anatomy and the available CDAs in this anatomy. And the randomization buttons here in these categories are connected to the anatomy and collection combination. So for example, here in the human female adult anatomy and in the sport collection, I have only glasses, as we can also see on the left side in the CDA manager. To show you another feature, I want to switch back to the any collection, collapse to classes and go to the upper bodies, because there are larger CDAs that you see better. And on the right side you can see apply buttons, so you can quickly apply individual CDAs now for testing as well. And with the delete button you can undress them. Besides the new character editor tools, the most important widgets related to gameplay tags have received larger refactorings and minor changes as well. For example, the CDA picker, the CDA loader and the profile manager have new abstraction layers, making it easier for you to extend and inheriting them. The CDA collection picker now stores selected collections per anatomy automatically, and the expandable category got improved randomization handling. Since the changes are more technical than visual, I can give you a short overview right now and you can read the full details in the documentation. As you can see here, we have the CDA picker default style, which replaces the apparel picker, the hairstyle picker and the groom picker. It has the parent class CDA picker base. Each CDA picker now has a CDA picker item default style, which replaces the old main item. The parent class is CDA picker item base. Then we have the CDA loader default style, which replaces the old CDA loader and has the parent class CDA loader base. And we have the profile manager as is, because it only got a new parent class profile manager base. You can inherit all these base classes on your own, and I show you real quick how to do this. Essentially, the base blueprints are widget class and provide you public functions and protected functions for your inherited child blueprints, where you provide also the visuals of the CDA picker, for example. The most important functions are initialize and update visuals, and you have also the possibility to use all the other functions as well, of course. And as you can see in the CDA picker item base, for example, or the CDA loader base, you have more or less functionality, sometimes even in the event graph, that is required for your implementation. The profile manager, on the other hand, is slightly more complex again. It has more functions in protected and public domain. And the CDA collection picker uses the new gameplay tag combo box for changes of the gameplay tag system. It can be initialized more easily now and also reinitialized more easily because it stores the selected collections per anatomy itself, and this makes it easier to reinitialize it in the character editor. The expandable category now uses its own initialize randomization function. So this has been also moved from the character editor to this widget. And it also utilizes now the isVisible functionality. So there is a bug fixed where you could randomize invisible sub-widgets underneath this category. Moving on to the metahumans, we added general makeup support, which you can use by these widgets here. We added widgets for the most prominent settings of the makeup. And one thing to note is that the widgets are only working with the metahuman materials for Unreal Engine 5.4 and 5.5, since the materials have changed in Unreal Engine 5.6 and all the parameters are missing now. Maybe in the future release of the new metahumans, the parameters come back and maybe then in a different form, so you have to update the widget parameters in here. Furthermore, we added optional skin and tattoo support, which means that you have to download the corresponding materials from the Metahumans integration page in our documentation, since we cannot provide the materials directly to you due to breaking references to all the Metahuman files. For your metahumans in Unreal Engine 5.4 and 5.5, you will be using the Embody skin material for your main mesh, where the skin tint sits next to the base color and the tattoo sits between the other nodes. For your head, you will be using mHead Baked, where the skin tint also sits next to the base color and next to the maker parameters. And the tattoo is split up into two nodes, where the tattoo sits also down below the skin tint for base color and roughness, and for the normal it sits down here between the normal path. As a short side trip to Unreal Engine 5.6, you will download this material function here, which provides the skin tint and tattoos in a single material function, and it sits in the mSkin unified bait, which is used for the body and the head mesh over here in the blue box. Back in our showcase project, we can now use the skin tint. for the tattoos. And also in Unreal 5.4 and 5.5 we can use the makeup. A nice shade. The foundation is for the whole face, and the concealer is just below the eyes. And the lipstick, as you can see, it also sits on top of the tattoo. Another well-desired change is that you can use the character editor with pawns instead of just characters. So we made it happen, and now you can use this pawn sample as a starting point, which is essentially a copy of the BP character, but with a parent class pawn. And the main change to our interfaces is that you have to use the getBaseBuddy component now, where you just return the mesh component that your body mesh should contain. And after implementing all the other interfaces, and for example the construction script where you provide the parameters of your blueprint to the BP character customization component, you can use the pawn sample or your custom pawn just like normal, drag in the scene or use it in your game mode. Here you can see similar settings as in the BP character. As mentioned, they are copied. You can load the profile, or if I possess the player 0, then you can control it. Run. So the movement component is not set up correctly, but it's just a sample for your customization. And by pressing C you can open the editor, randomize the apparel, and all the other things that you could do before with the character setup. The multiplayer got some enhancements as well. There's already been a feature that replicates customization profiles in dedicated servers and listen server scenarios to synchronize joining clients. This was used by the character customization component and meant that your character blueprint, or now pawn blueprint, would have to have the customization itself. So, but if you want to use pawns that do not have any customizations, then you can now use the new character customization controller blueprint. This is a component that you can add to your player controller class and simply makes this functionality work on its own. So it's independent on your actual pawn. As an example, we now have opened the character editor showcase replication map and set the default pawn class to default pawn, where the player controller class is the character editor player controller, which uses the new component. If I now start the game with 2 more clients, we can see in the server view that we have the character and the 2 players. I have rearranged the windows slightly, so you can see the server and the client simultaneously when I interact. And now if I switch to the client 1, you can see the characters replicating, and the same thing for the client 2. And if I now switch to the server and change the customization, you will see it replicating on the clients as well. To complement the before mentioned content features, more validation and debug info has been added. Besides that, blueprints and functions got more descriptions, and some fixes and cleanup happened. Just to name a few examples, this character now has an invalid anatomy data table applied, which displays this orange customization fallback profile and adjusted warnings and error messages. The character customization component got divided event graphs to improve the loading speed of this blueprint when editing. And the package registry got its own debug mode, similar to the character customization component, where you can choose between showing errors, warnings, informations, and so on. As an example, if we click Show Errors, Warnings, and Detailed Information, we can clear the log to view them better and open the character editor tools, reload the CDAs, and in the output log you can see the initialization, which packages got loaded, and so on. Last but not least, the documentation has been updated to reflect all of these changes. We've also redesigned identifiers like function and variable names in the wiki to better visualize how text and logic relate. That wraps up the version 11 gameplay tag update of the character editor. Whether you're starting fresh or migrating from version 10, we hope you enjoy the new update. If you haven't yet, check the wiki, explore the standalone demo, and share your feedback. Have a good day and thanks for watching.